Hey guys, today we are finally making macarons. I've got lots of requests for this tutorial since a while ago, so I'm so excited to finally share this one today. I tried to pack as much batter as possible in this video. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you like the content and share with your friends who also love to make macarons. I divided this video into these sections so that you can follow easily as you watch, and I'm sharing my tips and tricks on each section. So successful macarons have shiny surface with feet on the bottom, which make them look extra beautiful. But as many of you know, macarons are known as very difficult to make successfully.
That is because they are sensitive and can get affected hugely with manufacturers, although the ingredients and steps are pretty simple.
So today I'm going to share what's the factors exactly on each steps and how you can avoid those mistakes. So before we dive in and start making, let's learn about the types of macarons briefly, because I think it's very important to know ahead if you want to make macarons. So when you make macarons, meringue plays the most important part. And depending on what type of meringue we use, it's categorized separately. There are French method that use French meringue, and Italian method that use Italian meringue, and Swiss method that use Swiss meringue. Among that, French method and Italian method are most frequently used on average. Just on average, and today we are making macarons with Italian meringue. At the very beginning though, I started making macarons with French meringue, but lately I only use Italian method, and here's why. Although it might not be guaranteed depending on the recipe, but the plus of Italian method is the surface is shinier. This is because Italian meringue itself is shinier than French meringue itself. You see the difference if you made both of them before.
Macarons with French meringue have a slightly more matte shine like smooth wood, if I need to describe, and macarons with Italian meringue have slightly more glossy shine like a tile. It's a weird way to describe, but I hope that makes sense. And with French method, you get air bubbles on the surface much easier and does not look as smooth and flat as Italian method. It totally depends on the recipes and how you make them, but that's just how they are on average.
Number 2, you do not need to let the surface dry before baking.
With French method, you need to let the surface dry enough before baking most of the time, otherwise the surface is going to crack easily in oven, but that's not the case with Italian method usually. But there are exceptions for this, so I'll talk about it later in this video.
Number 3, the batter is more stable. This is simply because Italian meringue itself is more stable than French meringue because it's cooked with syrup.
For example, if you leave your French meringue in a room temperature just after being made, it quickly starts collapsing after a minute or so. But for Italian meringue, it stays the form much longer. So with the Italian method, it is slightly more tolerant with mistakes.
But the texture with Italian method macarons have more volume, so it's still wet inside but have this nice fluffier texture. With French method, macaron has slightly less volume usually and have this nice wet delicate texture. If you've never made macarons with Italian meringue before, I recommend to try it out, and I would say it might take some practices until you can make them very successfully by keeping all the crucial points I will make today. But don't get discouraged even if you failed. That happened to me a lot for myself as well, and that is simply a chance for you to get better next time. Watch this video over and over, or other videos over and over, and try to learn what the cause was. And if you still don't know why, leave me a comment below and I'll try to reply you back as soon as possible to give you my own advice. So this is gonna be a slightly longer video than usual with lots of information, so get ready, just relax, prepare your hot drink and enjoy. So the most important thing before you start is to make sure there's no liquids, oil or dirt in your equipment, tools or ingredients or anything else you use to make macarons.
Because macarons are made with meringue and meringue hates them so much, so it might not whip up properly or cause other problems later, so check everything is dried and clean. So here is the ingredients. Just like I mentioned in other videos, when you separate egg whites and yolks, make sure that yolks are not going in the egg whites because yolks contain oil and prevent egg whites from whipping really well. Also, almond flour plays very important role for beautiful macarons. Most importantly, it has to be fine almond flour. When it is not fine enough, the surface might not look so smooth and it cracks easier in the oven from my experience, since it cannot hold up the meringue than it should do. This is the almond flour I used today. I've been using this lately. It is great quality almond flour with a very reasonable price. As far as I know, it is sold at Aldi, the grocery store. I also used this blend before and really loved it. It's probably one of the most popular one people are using for macaron making in the States, at least. It's sold at most grocery stores in the States.
But I know that a lot of my subscribers are from different countries. So if you found a really good almond flour for macarons in your country, comment below and let us know your country and the brand name and where people can get them to help out others who are living in your country and wondering which one to get.
If you cannot get fine almond flour though, do not worry. You can process it with powdered sugar to grind it even more using a food processor. Even if you could get fine almond flour, you can still grind even more to make it more fine if you would like, but I am just too lazy to do that usually, to be honest. I recommend it, but as long as it tastes and looks great, it's not like you have to do that. But if the surface doesn't look so smooth or cracks in oven, I recommend to try it out.
Also, do not process too long because the oil inside almond flour might come out. Even though you can't really see it visibly oftentimes, you will see that it really messes up the textures and looks once it's baked.
So let's make Italian meringue. Add sugar and water in the pot. Make sure all the sugar is wet with water before heating. And we're gonna heat it up to 244 Fahrenheit, which is 118 Celsius. Meanwhile, we're gonna whip egg whites as we pay attention to the syrup. So every time I make Italian meringue, I personally whip egg white until it gets very fluffy, like fluffy crowd, before I add syrup to make sure the meringue will not be runny after the syrup is added. And today I took small amount of sugar for the syrup and added to the meringue as I whipped like this. And sometimes I do this, add a small amount of sugar, or sometimes I don't and use all the sugar for the syrup. And it works either way. But the reason I did this time is because sugar has a power to prevent egg whites from whipping too much or stabilize the meringue. So just to be a little safe, I added the small insurance, so to say, for my meringue. By the way, if you want to learn a little bit more about Italian meringue, I made the video all about it, so check it out later. I'll leave the link below. So going back to my syrup, it's now reached to the temperature 118 Celsius. Then immediately remove from the heat and slowly add it to the meringue as you whip with high speed. You can of course use a hand mixer as well. It's just gonna be a little bit more work. You're gonna have to use both hands. So it's kind of hidden with mixer here, but you want to add it from the side of your bowl like this. When you add like this slowly, the syrup slowly goes down along the bowl and a whisk can pick it up evenly. When you add too much too fast, they tend to sink on the bottom, might not get whipped properly, or your meringue might get cooked with hot syrup partially and will not be so smooth. After all the syrup is added, keep whipping with high speed until it starts to cool down more, which takes some time. So meanwhile, I usually do other things to prepare for later. So macarons with Italian method are made of Italian meringue plus a paste made with almond flour, powdered sugar, and egg whites. So we're gonna mix all of them now. Sift the almond flour and powdered sugar first. If your almond flour is fine enough, like I explained earlier, you should not get too much flour caught in your sieve when you do this. I'm mainly doing this to make sure there is no lumps or dirt. And add egg whites and mix. So when you mix here, mix gently and try not to add too much pressure, because when you do that, oils from almond flour sometimes start to come out and it creates stains on the surface of your macarons after they are baked. You do not need to mix it too much, just let them blend roughly like this. So I recommend to add paste or gel type food coloring instead of very liquid types, especially when you want to add a good amount. When you add too much liquid type coloring, the batter gets runny, the texture changes, or cause other problems much easier. These are just a few brands that work great for macaron making. I'll leave the links of them so you can check out. Also, you can add coloring at 3 stages. Number 1, when you make the paste. Add with egg white and mix together. Number 2, to the Italian meringue right before it's ready. This is not recommended when you add liquid type coloring or add a lot of paste or gel coloring, since it might affect the consistency of meringue. Number 3, when you do macaronage. So it's up to you. I personally color at stage 1 or 3 most of the times. So let's go back to the meringue and see if it's ready. touch the bowl and check how warm it is. When it is too hot or too warm, it is not ready. When the bowl is comfortably warm, like a baby bath, it is ready. Or touch the meringue itself and you almost don't feel anything or feel that it's very slightly warm, it is ready. So that's how I judge. When you keep whipping too long, eventually the volume starts going down and get runnier, which leads to runnier butter and which leads to problems such as thin macarons. Or when you add hot or very warm meringue, it causes many problems like the surface gets uneven or the texture is very rough and so on. When it is made successfully, your meringue should be fluffy but has nice elasticity and the tip curls up like this when you lift up your whisk. When you add syrup cooked up to a higher temperature, the meringue gets more stiff and it causes many problems such as not so smooth and tippy surface, the surface cracks in oven and so on. On the contrary, when you add syrup cooked up to a lower temperature, the meringue gets softer and cause problems such as stains on the surface, very flat macarons and so on. Start mixing right after the meringue is ready. I add about 1/3 of the meringue first and add the rest once they are blended well. When I mix, I do cut and fold motion and try not to add too much pressure by mixing very vigorously because oils from almond flour might start to come out. And I would say many people have their own favorite ways to mix or judge when it's done. Some people use a hand with a glove, a spatula, a dough scraper, or even mixing machine with a pedal. Today, I made one batch of the recipe and it's not a lot of amount, so I use spatula and show how I judge if it's done. But there's no so correct way to do this, so I recommend to learn from many other chefs as well and pick a way you like the most. When you do macaronage too much, it gets runnier and cause problems like the butter spread too much when you pipe or do not create feet on the bottom and so on. And when your macaronage is not enough, the meringue is still too stiff and cause other problems such as rough and tippy surface or the surface cracks in oven and so on. When it's ready, it starts getting shiny and when you scoop some with a spatula and drop like this, it flows very slowly, like very thick caramel or like sponge butter. I'm not best at explaining this, but let me know how you would describe. You can also draw a number or lines and if it stays first but slowly ooze out and spread a little bit, it means it's done. Slowly is the key. The same thing is going to happen when you pipe. Right after you pipe, you might still see piped lines on the surface a little bit, but it slowly spreads a little bit and goes away. So when you pipe, you might get pointy tips on top. Even though you tap the tray later, sometimes they do not go away completely. So here is how you can pipe professionally to avoid any tips.
So I'm just gonna demo with empty pastry bag just to show you how to squeeze. So first, do not attach your tip on the mat while you're squeezing. Lift up just a little bit, like this much, and squeeze from here, not here or here. And do not move the position at all while you are squeezing, and squeeze. And once you finish squeezing and get the size you want, this is important, stop squeezing. Do not add any pressure from your hands. And I move the tip like this, just like I draw a circle, as fast as possible. A lot of people try to cut it off while they are still adding pressure from hands, and that's why they get the pointy tips. So again, lift up like this, freeze your position, squeeze, stop the pressure, and swish and cut off. Lift, freeze, squeeze, stop, and swish.
After you pipe like that and tap the tray, if the surface is still not smooth and you still see points, there may be a couple main reasons behind. Number one, your meringue was probably more stiff than it should be, which means it was probably cooked up to a higher temperature than it should be. Number two, your macaronage was not done enough. And number three, you added very warm meringue. The heat is gonna mess up the look and texture when you do that. There may be other causes that I forgot to mention about, but they are one of them.
So a lot of people don't focus on this much, but ovens play one of the biggest part for macarons.
Some are ideal, some are not ideal for macaron making. For example, ovens with a fan installed inside work better because the air flows and they get cooked evenly. On the contrary, some ovens might have very strong heat coming from the bottom, top, or sides, and because of that, your macarons might get cooked unevenly.
Or some ovens might simply have a stronger heat than others, and that means your macarons can clack even if you follow the exact temperatures from recipes.
But does it mean you have to have this ideal oven? The answer is no. Most of the times, you can make macarons with your not ideal oven by trying some things out. I myself have a gas oven with strong heat from the bottom, and it was a struggle until I find my solutions, but now it works somehow. So first,
what you can do is you need to get to know about your oven first. Test and see if your oven has stronger heat or not, and if the heat comes from the bottom or a few directions, or come really evenly with a fan. Know those characters with baking macarons or lots of other desserts, and adjust the temperature and baking time accordingly. Other things you could do when too much heat comes from the bottom, just like my oven is, great, right? You could set an extra tray on the bottom rack of your oven or under the tray you're using, like this, to give it an extra shield and reduce the heat pressure from the bottom. Or you could let the surface dry just a little bit before baking, even for Italian method, so that it gives extra strength on the surface that can bear with the heat pressure from the bottom. I hope that makes sense, but those are just a few ideas that you could try. So learn about your oven and solve it creatively.
Poke the head with the finger very gently, and if the head springs back like this, like a mushroom, it means feet are set on the ground and ready to take out from an oven. When macarons are still warm, they are still sticky and does not come out easily, so make sure to cool them down completely before doing so. Also, if your oven does not bake evenly like my oven is, the ones on the edges probably get baked faster than the ones close to the center. And those ones close to the center might be a little bit sticky, so in that case, I like to use a small spatula like this and take them off all at once. Make sure you push down the spatula all the way when you are doing that so that you're not going to hurt the feet. Also, this is something I don't do all the time, but when the macarons are small like today, I push the center like this and create a pocket to feel more filling. I like macarons with lots of filling, and when you try to do that with smaller macarons, it looks too tall and kind of weird and cannot hold the balance well with the weights sometimes. So I do this to feel more filling. So today I decided to do macarons that goes with cheese and wine. So I cut small pieces of cream cheese and laying them on top, and piped my favorite French buttercreams. This buttercream is so rich and holds shape really well. It goes so well with macarons, so check out the tutorial if you are interested. And lastly, I spread a good amount of homemade apricot jam. So usually apricot jam at stores are very jelly-like texture and not really condensed. So this time I used dry apricot to make very rich jam, or paste I should say. In case you are interested, here is how I made it. First, pour hot boiling water over the dried apricot to soften them. I waited like 30 minutes or so and drained water and diced them into small pieces, and combine the apricot sugar, some water, and lemon juice as you like, and boil them together. Once it's boiled, I pureed with a hand blender. I didn't scale water this time, but you do not need to be too precise here. You want to add enough amount for a hand blender to puree them easily. It gets thickened a little bit more once it's cold, but if you feel like it's too loose at this point, simply cook more to reduce the liquid.
Alright, that's it for today. I hope I did not overwhelm you with too many informations. Definitely watch this video a couple more times before you make them to really input the knowledges and techniques. I bet I missed mentioning about some information that you might want to know. So if so, feel free to leave a comment and ask your question. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And let me know if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet to see more future videos all about beautiful pastries from scratch. Thank you for watching all the way up to the end, and congratulations for sticking this long. It really shows that you are so passionate about what you do. keep baking, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!